Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the EPRI Current podcast. This is part of the Ambition into Action special series. I'm your host, Dan Monaghan, and I have another two fantastic guests with me today. We're going to talk about all sorts of cool things. But first, a little background to catch you up if you haven't been following along. This special series is about the Global Forum for Nuclear Innovation. This is a global consortium of all sorts of organizations aimed at accelerating the adoption of innovation, the technologies, and the culture in the nuclear industry. We have all sorts of things that we would like to do with this technology over the next 20, 30, 50 years. And everyone around the world agrees that helping to improve innovation is a fundamental part of getting to those different deployment targets, making new reactors hit the grid. And we are here to help make that happen. In the Global Forum, there's a variety of grand challenges that have been identified. We've been doing one of these episodes about each of these grand challenges. Today, we're focusing on operating a lean machine. The nuclear workforce is a very large workforce. There are all sorts of people who have very highly specialized skills, and they work tirelessly around the clock to keep energy being generated from these nuclear power plants. When you look at different generation technologies like natural gas, you often see a lot less people who are operating these power plants, even for the same amount of generation. One of the areas that the Global Forum for Nuclear Innovation identified as an area to improve is in this use of technologies and the optimization of the people we have. These people are the backbone of our workforce. They are the most important part of what we do. And giving them technology and tools to make the best use of their skills is something that a lot of industries have done a really good job of. In the nuclear industry, we're looking at how we can learn from these other industries and use some of the technologies being developed for us and for others to really help optimize the people who we have today. Joining me today to talk about this grand challenge, operating a lean machine, we have, our two fantastic guests. So first, we have Kimberly Cook-Nelson. She is the Chief Nuclear Officer at Entergy, a utility who operates in the United States. And Kimberly's not just any CNO. She pretty much worked her way from the ground up all the way through plants, through all sorts of different roles to get to this point, and has experience sort of throughout the utility industry, serving her ratepayers pretty much since the start of her career. It's a pretty cool story. And joining us, we also have Brendan Hall. Brendan, he raced a yacht around the world with an extremely small team. And I mean, that's already kind of incredible on its own. But being able to lead in that kind of a challenging environment and to make the best use of a very small amount of people is an impressive feat for operating a lean machine. So you can see why we have these two people on here. So to get this started, I want to first ask Brendan a question. Teams begin with people and with their skills. So I want to know, when you were setting out on this task of winning a round the world race, did you start by structuring your team around the people you had, or effectively you knew who you wanted and you decided what kind of roles they would fill because of who they were? Or did you build a team based on skills and capabilities and fill that with people who had those skills and capabilities? What direction did you go from?
Well, very great to be with you, Dan and Kimberly. And an interesting answer to that. So this particular round the world race that I did as the appointed leader of one of the teams in it, you get no say in who's on your crew. You are quite literally allocated a team. So I wasn't able to go out there and sort of handpick the best of the best from the talent pool that was out there. Comically, quite literally one day I was handed a single sheet of A4 paper with 44 names and contact details on it and said, there's your team. You take it around the world. Good luck, son. So from that, you survey the crew. I was asking everyone, so what do you want to get out of the experience, and why are you here, and what motivates you, and how can we kind of work best together? And you know what? I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people listening who can relate to this. I made that assumption that we often do as leaders, right? Where we assume other people think the same way we do, want the same things that we do, are motivated in the same way that we are, that cognitive bias we have. And yeah, the answers I got back blew me away by how different they were. I got one person who said they were there to win at all costs. Someone else who said they were there to try and meet a romantic partner. I mean, and you know what? Everyone's skill levels was wildly differing. So from all that, you know, I've got this raw material, I suppose. I've got to put together this team culture, this ethos, this way of working that, like you, has to keep people safe. Number one priority, of course, no question, no compromise. But it had to also be high performing. We weren't there just to cruise around the world. And we had to find a way of structuring this team whereby we played to people's strengths. We gave everyone kind of most of the things that sort of motivated them. Like, you can't give everyone exactly everything they want, but you've got a broad compromise that satisfies the most needs, the most people. Everyone's happy to buy into it and through their discretionary effort towards, you know, achieving the goal that we set. And I think more than any of the other boats, we managed to create a culture that did that. It was very much sort of people first. We weren't there as the most competitive boat at the start. We were focused on building the team, building the trust, building the capability, and that's what got us to the success in the end. And we did succeed, and we won this round the world sailing race by the largest margin it had ever been won by at the end.
That's pretty impressive, taking that sort of a fixed set of people and having to figure out everything they can do and then attempt to craft a strategy with that in mind has got to be quite a challenge. Now, that's not too dissimilar from what you've been doing, right, Kimberly? So, I mean, you're a leader in the industry, but the people in the workforce who work at Entergy have been there for a long time. They've been running the plants and they've been keeping day-to-day operations going. So can you tell me what it takes to come to be a leader for this large team and then set a direction and to try and help them work towards it?
Yeah, you know, it's funny listening to Brendan, because everything that you just said about people and the different, you know, everybody's, you know, got their own things that motivate them and it's the same, right? It's a larger team. You know, I've got over 3,500 folks trying to get all aligned to the same endpoint, but everything you just said is exactly the same. But when it comes down to, you know, how you're running an organization, how you're attempting to achieve goals, you know, for us, top quartile performance in all aspects, it really does come down to people. People are our greatest competitive advantage, and how we engage, empower, enable those folks to be the best that they can in what they're doing, you know, positioning them in the right positions and then giving all the tools and skills to get them there. That is the crucial piece. You know, I'm a big fan of, and you probably know, Dan, you might not know Brendan, but the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations put out some time ago a document. It's called, in fact, I had it right here, Leadership and Team Effectiveness Attributes 1505. And it almost, I use it almost like a playlist, because it talks about how you set a clear vision and a strategy, how you develop your talent, how you motivate, communicate, inspire, how you coach and foster accountability, how you monitor your results. And, you know, it's all right there. And, you know, it sounds easy when you're just reading it on a piece of paper, but we all know it's really, really hard, and it takes consistency, you know, every day in every interaction.
Yeah, with a team as big as you have, there's a lot of, I guess, cultural inertia there. You come in with these ideas, but these people many of them have spent their whole lives doing not the same thing, but similar things and working their way through these various plants and parts of the organization. So there's a lot there already to work with. Putting people in the right position seems like a really important, to both of you, way of doing this operation of a lean machine. That way you can sort of not get the most out of people in an extractive way, but give them an opportunity to make the most of the skills they have and the interests they have. Now, there's an interesting aspect to both of the areas that you work in that we're talking about here, in that safety is such a fundamental part of what we do. I mean, if you're at sea, you obviously don't want to lose people over the side or in any of the more not dangerous, I suppose, but more physically hazardous ways that you have to operate in a nuclear plant. There are all sorts of hazards that you have to be aware of and be cognizant of so that you can safely operate. And that's why compliance to process and procedure is so important, because we've defined what safe but operable really looks like. So, Brendan, can you tell me more about how you can use elements of culture to incentivize that compliance when it's necessary, when everyone has to work together the same way to keep safety, but also allow innovation when it's safe to do so?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Sailing is a game of risk-adjusted performance. So we were always cognizant of risk, and this, that obviously people get lost at sea all the time. On this particular race that I did, there have been fatalities. It's everyone signs up. They've got to sign a big contract saying, with a no BS death waiver, saying, I understand the risks here and I'm prepared to go. So, they know the stakes are high. And when you're sailing on a boat, when you're out there kind of in the routine, going through the day by day, these legs where we would sail, say, from Rio de Janeiro to Cape Town, it would be about 20 days. We're out there, you're racing, you've got that kind of, we call it our red thinking hat on, where it's about compliance, it's about doing the right thing, sticking to the playbook, and kind of, just executing on the strategy that we've got and doing all our operations, just by the book. But what we found was that we needed a point when that pressure to perform was kind of temporarily relaxed. And because of the cadence of this race, when we arrived in port, we arrived in Cape Town, South Africa, we would have between 1 and 2 weeks to get the boat repaired, get ourselves ready before we head off on the next leg. And it was at that point where we said, right, we can take the red hats off, then we're going to put the blue hats on. And that blue mode of thinking is one around, okay, we can start to challenge incumbent thought. We can sort of have some healthy dissent. We can talk about ways we can improve. We had these debrief meetings after every one of our races where we kind of forensically pick apart, not just the stuff that went wrong, but things we're doing well. And we used a very simple kind of stop, start, continue type of framework to keep it simple. But it was the mindset shift of going from compliance thinking to kind of innovation thinking. And given that these boats that we've got, they were all identical. So everyone's got the same resources. Everyone's following broadly the same strategy. Really, the only thing we could innovate on is the way we collaborated, different things we could do, things that would improve morale, and basically stuff that would improve the teamwork and the team on board. And so, again, we did that. It involves some difficult conversations at times. We have had accidents. We've had near misses. We've got to create a space where people can speak up, talk about mistakes in a healthy, psychologically safe way where they don't feel they've got to self-censor because it's a real blamey type culture. And we did. We created that psychological safety, that that incentive to speak up, particularly because people recognize that, a near miss this time could be a fatality next time. It was in everyone's interest. But just using, I suppose, the visual metaphor of the red hat and the blue hat, and just putting yourself into a sort of different mindset for those two different ways of thinking. But of course, the cadence of work that we had on this race allowed us to sort of have those discrete sort of sections. Doesn't map exactly onto the nuclear world, but it'd be interesting to think about I'll ask Kimberly, how does that look when you translate over to your work?
I appreciate that. That, it speaks to me from the standpoint of, we're actually working through a cultural change in Entergy Nuclear right now. We moving from a very authoritarian, kind of top down, culture, very compliance based, to a grassroots culture, where, everybody's engaged. Everybody has ideas. I mean, you said it, everybody has ideas. So how do we empower folks? How do we have people feel the safety to bring them forward, but also the empowerment to go fix them, right? Not just identify something was wrong, but I identify it, I see it, I own it, and I'm going to go do something about it. And, the thing about, how do you build that trust? It's not just because you told someone, oh yeah, we're safe, you're good, right? You got to build it over time. You got to show people, you got to listen, you got to help. Yeah, that is a great idea. Let's go do that. What's our first step? And then supporting folks through the process to get it to fruition. When I look back, in commercial nuclear, we have layered, it starts with compliance, and you have to have compliance. And there's there's lines that you cannot cross. We've layered a lot of stuff on top of what we do that's above and beyond compliance. Some of them is really good, right? We've learned lessons over the years and we've made things better, and it needs to stick. Some of them we just layered and maybe we don't need those layers anymore. And working to unwind those, and then celebrating when people do it. You have to celebrate the successes. And it doesn't mean, some big, shindig or some big check or something, just a lot of people just appreciate the acknowledgement and the thank you and the, hey, you just made everything better for everybody else. What can we go do next? And it's been interesting to watch here at Entergy. We have made a lot of progress. We still have a ways to go. But in the end, again, it's all about the people. The people is what's going to make us successful.
As you've peeled back some of those layers and taken away maybe some extraneous things that people were doing, have you noticed any tangible efficiency gains? Has removing those maybe barriers to operation that didn't necessarily have to be there been apparent?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have various ways to monitor, and I could talk about tech enablement and different ways that we've done it, but you have to also monitor, what you're doing, and you have to have the right metrics in place to know that you're actually making a difference, that the words are turning into actions, et cetera. And what I'll say is, I have a big focus on, I call it 3 legs of the stool, because there's some things that's really easy to go measure. I can measure a dollar. A dollar is a dollar is a dollar. I can measure hours. There's other things like organizational health and, happy engagement of folks. It's a little bit harder. Most of us do, some survey that comes out once a year, and, you get your thumbs up, your thumbs down, whatever it is. But how do you do that on a regular basis? And we got to figure those out, because, there's organizational health, there's performance. Our plants have to perform. And then there are the efficiency gains and ultimately the cost pressures that lots of us are under that we have to measure. So making sure that we're keeping the right focus on all 3 legs of those stool are very important, and having the right metrics for each.
That makes a lot of sense. No, I mean, we do what we measure ourselves to do.
Yeah. You get what you inspect, not what you expect. You heard that before too, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. So and this is a question back to Brendan. For both of you, you've basically created these cultures that have a degree of, let's say, integration with any existing culture that may have existed. And for Brendan, wow, I'm not going to say it was easy. With less people, there was probably a little less cultural inertia, especially given that it was kind of a fresh group coming together. So that may have taken better. But I'm curious, so there's all sorts of books. I mean, there's whole courses you can take on theories of leadership and on traits of an effective leader. Are there any specific traits that proved particularly valuable at managing this culture? And similarly, are there any traits that you had to set aside to be able to succeed in the conditions you had?
Well, it's interesting. I read probably most of the books you're thinking of before I set out in the race. And I think, most of them could be condensed to a blog post, but don't get me started. But the second is, so much of it is about setting aside behaviors that you realize aren't serving yourself and aren't serving the team. I set out with the best of intentions, but I found myself in the early days far too emotionally volatile, kind of letting my emotional state get too closely coupled to the performance of the boat. So, when the numbers are good, I'm like showing up in the right kind of way. But when the numbers aren't good, then, I start getting really short with people. I got a very strong writing reflex. So I want to go and fix problems. And, and you're kind of pulling tasks out of people's hands. And really the signal you're giving them is I trust you, or I say I do, but actually if things start getting a bit dicey, I'm pulling it all back. I don't trust you after all. I was pulled up on that. And I had to sort of realize that my attitude, my behavior was going to be mirrored in the team. And the team becomes the microcosm of a leader. You really start to feel that responsibility. And you can see everyone taking their sort of emotional and attitudinal cues from how they see you handling these situations, particularly when times get tough. And the other one, and this is, I think, something that I certainly grappled with, that was part of my journey of leadership, was one of letting go. And like I said, I'm a strong, involved, passionate leader, and I tied a lot of my identity to being that kind of directive person that kind of gives instructions to people, and all eyes are on you, and you're sort of deferred to, and it's not that it sort of makes you an egomaniac and super authoritarian, but it's a very validating feeling, and it makes you work harder and give more of yourself, and as the team matures and they start to really stand to their full height, you've given them the empowerment, created that ownership, and all that stuff we know we should do in the book, so you have to do. I remember I started to feel a little bit redundant and a little bit, they don't need me anymore. I don't feel seen anymore. I don't feel valued in the same way that I used to back when you were sort of the font of all knowledge. And you know what? I had to understand that it's one of those what got you here won't get you there moments. And to sort of take that control back would really be to selfishly stifle the potential of this team that was really starting to stand to its full height, and they kind of didn't need you as much anymore. But crucially, it allowed me to really switch my focus from being operational and sort of there with the long screwdriver, that hawkish supervising presence, kind of, making sure everything happens, to sort of thinking big picture and thinking strategy, to thinking up beyond the horizon, creating clarity around roles, to training, mentoring, and in a way adding value at a higher level and doing stuff that only I could do. And you know what? Once I did that and made that shift, even though it felt less validating, if I'm honest with you, I started to derive my personal satisfaction from seeing the team do it on their own, akin to the journey of parenthood, of course. And B, just thinking I am adding value and I'm doing it at a higher, smarter level. And this is leading to a better result. And you know what? Once I did that and made that shift, our performance went up and up and up. And it was in the closing stages of this race where we absolutely cleaned up. And it was because I'd made that shift from being sort of probably a bit too operational because it felt validating to being that sort of strategic thinking leader who was there to create a space for others to perform. And that's what did it for us.
I really love that. Especially the recognition of the transition that has to take place after you've helped bring a team up to speed and gotten them capable, recognizing when and then being able to yourself cognitively shift in a completely separate way from what you've been doing. Sort of a singular distinction for you is that you then need to be able to set a lot of that aside and move in a completely different direction. And that probably helped a lot in getting those strategic end game improvements that helped you all win.
With the single caveat of if there's a crisis moment, of course, it's entirely appropriate for that leader to jump back in and take that control.
That makes sense. No, all hands on deck in that sort of circumstance, I'd imagine. So, Kimberly, I'd imagine that you've experienced something similar throughout your career, going from someone who primarily does a lot of hands-on work yourself to the point you're at now where you are responsible for developing culture as opposed to turning a wrench yourself. In watching the team you have growing into their roles and beginning to feel more comfortable with this bottom-up culture that you're trying to help instill, are you getting the kind of free flow of ideas that you want? Are you seeing the people who are in roles that you formerly held sharing ideas that maybe you kept to yourself because there was a different culture at the time? And what is some of the benefit and the positive results that you're seeing that comes from these ideas being shared?
First, I gotta say that I was giggling when Brendan was talking, because I can fellow type A personality, and I can relate to so much that you were talking about, especially as you mentioned, as I moved on in the career, what got me here is not what gonna get me there, because as you go from the stuff that you have to do to the stuff that you have to teach to, okay, now it's setting direction and strategy, and, it's you're learning constantly. But at the same time, whenever something is not going right in the organization, the first thing you also have to do is go look in the mirror, right? What are the behaviors that I'm exhibiting? What are the actions that I'm taking that is not allowing the team to flourish? And then how do I course correct my own behaviors to help, whether it's taking some reins in a little bit, letting some reins out a little bit, maybe stepping back, just leaving the room for a minute and letting them hash it out and then coming back, whatever that looks like. But anyway, so I was giggling there. The question about, the ideas, we're good nukes. We put processes in place to go capture all the ideas and, prioritize them out, see which ones have the biggest bang for the buck, make sure we take our limited resources and put them on all the right things. And I'll tell you, once you open those floodgates, we've got, over 1,000 ideas that are sitting, in some sort of waiting area, doing a business case or, in execution, in different ways. And then when people see things happening, you get even more ideas, or people are doing even more, so I had a young lady up at one of our plants, and she wanted to build an app, how to streamline how we do benchmarking, capture our benchmarking things, the actions. And so she put it in, then where it kind of shook out, it was going to be a little while to get the IT support to go help build that app. So she went out and got on YouTube and the web and all that and figured out how to build an app. And she built her own app. And now we're using it, across the sites to go get ideas, grab them, download them, and then built another app about idea generation. And so now it's like App Central and, just those little things. And now it's a peer built that app, not me, not one of my folks, but a peer built that app. And now it's like, hey, go use my app. And, it just helps to proliferate all that. But again, I'll go back to what I said earlier too. The key is people want to feel valued, right? I want to feel valued. And, helping folks when they have those ideas, to get them to fruition and then showing them the value that they're creating and recognizing that value to the team. I just can't say enough of that. Because there has to be follow through. Getting the ideas is one thing. People have ideas that, hey, this is the 5th time I've brought this idea up. You hadn't done anything yet, so why should I bring it up again? But getting them to keep going and then bringing them to fruition. If you don't have the follow through, you'll squash it. You'll squash it immediately. So follow through is so important.
Giving people something visible, something tangible to hold on to, where they can see that their idea was not just heard and listened to or valued by someone somewhere, but actually executed on, letting them really see the benefit that their idea becoming reality has had on either their job or the jobs of their peers around them. I think that's an incredibly valuable thing. And it's a major part of what this particular global forum is focusing on: ambition into action, taking those ideas, thousands of them that we have, and translating them into something real, something that we can see work, something that we can, I don't know if it's a robot, you can play with it. If it's a new process that adopts artificial intelligence to streamline some sort of a workflow that helps save you yourself weeks of time, all sorts of things that I've seen happen are just really kind of incredible to observe. And it's at that union of the capable and invested workforce we have and the technologies that they see having a potential impact on the jobs they do every day. Watching the way that people with this knowledge say, no, I see that you're trying to use AI to do these couple of things, but let me tell you what you should really do with it. And then going and showing you how it's done, even if they have no familiarity with the technology, but they know what it can do and they know what it needs to do. And having that experiential knowledge applied to all of these cutting edge technologies really seems like the best way, in my opinion, to give these extremely valuable people in our workforce the tools they need to make the best use of their talents, capabilities, and interests, like we've been talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the people who are doing the work have the best idea of how to do the work. And that's where all the awesome ideas come from. I mean, we're getting ideas on, we're working on, remote monitoring, predictive maintenance, using some of the remote monitoring, artificial intelligence and automation and work management in corrective action program, in that predictive monitoring, the use of drones. We're using drones more. The little robot dogs, we got a couple of them too, right? They're running around the plants, doing various things. And it's just amazing. I was at one of the plants the other day, and I was with an INC tech, and I was following around doing a surveillance, and he was telling me about this piece of MNTE that he's building, right? So he's doing the surveillance. He's got this one big box and then this other big box, and he's carrying them both around. And he's saying that I'm building a box that will be this big and take both of these away. And he's already built it. He built it on his own time, and he's bringing it to our engineering folks to get it qualified for MNTE, which is like our, measurement and test equipment that's all calibrated and that kind of stuff. And I mean, how does it get any better than that? Right? I mean, it's awesome stuff that our folks are doing, and just continuing to look for those great, how can we do this better, faster, higher quality, et cetera.
And on that inspiring thought, that is the time we have today. I want to thank both Brendan and Kimberly for taking the time to sit down and talk with me today about their experience, their knowledge, and their perspective on really people, which is at the core of operating a lean machine, at the core of ambition into action, at the core of the global forum. All of this comes down to people. And I really appreciate both of your perspectives. Thank you so much for being with me here today. I think that all of our listeners are going to get quite a bit out of this particular episode. And I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Great being here. Thanks.
Bye for now, everyone, and see you next time.